Welcome, truth seekers. What if I told you that the world as we know it is shifting right now, quietly, powerfully, and irreversibly? That a nation once overlooked is now rising with a force so bold, even the most powerful can't ignore it. This isn't just a story of politics or power, it's a spiritual awakening, a calling, a reminder that greatness comes from within. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just information, it's transformation. By the end of this journey, you won't just understand why America can't sleep, you'll see why the world is waking up to India. In 2025, the world is witnessing an economic shift that can no longer be ignored. India is rising, and rising fast. Once seen as a developing nation dependent on global superpowers, India is now transforming into an economic powerhouse with momentum that's sending shockwaves across the globe. With a projected GDP growth outpacing most major economies, India is on track to surpass both Germany and Japan to become the world's third largest economy. This isn't a fluke, it's the result of years of strategic planning, demographic strength, and relentless innovation. What's driving this surge? It starts with India's massive consumer base, one of the largest and youngest in the world. This youthful energy is fueling domestic demand like never before. Startups are exploding in fintech, health tech, and e-commerce. Global companies are shifting manufacturing and operations from China to India, betting on its long-term stability and talent. India's focus on self-reliance through programs like Atmanirbhar Bharat is no longer just a slogan, it's a strategy that's reshaping how the country builds its economy. With bold infrastructure projects, digital payments revolution, and a rapidly growing middle class, India is no longer playing catch-up, it's setting the pace. America, long comfortable at the top of the economic food chain, is watching closely. Because India's rise doesn't just mean another competitor. It means a challenger that can grow independently of Western systems. A challenger that's not afraid to call its own shots, build its own alliances, and write its own rules. This economic transformation is not only real, it's relentless. And for a nation that's been underestimated for decades, India is finally standing tall. The world is taking notice. And some, especially in the halls of Washington, are starting to feel the pressure of a giant that refuses to be ignored. In 2025, India isn't just keeping up with the world's technological race. It's leading in ways that many never expected. From artificial intelligence to space technology, from digital payments to next-generation computing, India's innovation ecosystem is exploding with energy and ambition. This isn't the India the West once saw as a tech support hub. This is a new India, bold, inventive, and ready to define the future. India's digital public infrastructure is one of the most advanced on the planet. The Unified Payments Interface (UPI) has revolutionized transactions, reaching even the most remote villages. Its success has caught the attention of global leaders, with some Western nations now seeking to replicate India's model. Meanwhile, Indian engineers are driving breakthroughs in AI, quantum computing, biotech, and cybersecurity, not just domestically, but in global companies and research labs across the world. The Indian Space Research Organization ISRO is rewriting what's possible on a budget. After the success of Chandrayaan-3's historic moon landing, India has firmly placed itself among the elite spacefaring nations. And this momentum is only accelerating, with missions to Mars, solar observation, and satellite launch dominance taking shape. What's even more threatening to the old powers is the rise of Indian homegrown tech giants and a booming startup ecosystem that rivals Silicon Valley. With government support, venture capital, and global collaboration, India is rapidly becoming the next frontier for technological leadership. All of this innovation, all of this progress, it's not happening in secret. It's happening in plain sight, and the U.S., once unchallenged in tech supremacy, is beginning to see a future where India is no longer just a participant in the digital revolution, but a leader. For a nation used to setting the pace, that's a reality difficult to ignore and even harder to accept. In 2025, India is no longer playing by the old rules of global power. It's rewriting them. For decades, international politics followed a familiar pattern. Western alliances dictated global decisions, and nations like India were expected to choose sides. But today, India has flipped the script. It's not aligning, it's leading. And this bold geopolitical independence is what's unsettling the old order, especially in Washington. India has mastered the art of strategic balance. It maintains strong defense and economic ties with the United States, while simultaneously engaging Russia in energy deals and defense cooperation. It partners with France and Japan in the Indo-Pacific, while maintaining a dialogue with China despite tensions. This ability to walk multiple lines, without being pulled into another nation's orbit, makes India unpredictable, powerful, and respected. America, which is used to nations depending on its support or choosing clear alliances, is facing a country that refuses to be boxed in. India doesn't follow, it collaborates, it doesn't beg, it negotiates. That kind of sovereignty isn't just rare, it's revolutionary. India's leadership in global forums like BRICS, the G20, and the SCO shows its desire to give voice to the global South, to nations that have long felt sidelined by Western narratives. By championing development, climate justice, digital equity, and multipolar cooperation, India is signaling that it wants a new world order, one that is not controlled by a single ideology or bloc. This realignment is not just about diplomacy, it's about power. And as India rises, its choices are no longer reactive, they're strategic. Its influence now stretches beyond South Asia, reshaping trade routes, defense equations, and global policies. For a West that's used to steering the wheel, India's bold and balanced diplomacy is a wake-up call. A reminder that the global chessboard has changed, and there's a new player commanding attention. India in 2025 is not just growing economically and technologically, it's becoming a serious military force, and the world, especially the United States, is watching with quiet concern. For decades, India relied heavily on foreign defense suppliers to secure its borders. But that era is ending. Today, India is rapidly developing its own military power, making bold moves in land, air, sea, and space. The Indian armed forces are undergoing a major transformation. Indigenous production of fighter jets like the Tejas long-range missiles such as Agni and BrahMos, and advanced naval vessels are redefining India's defense capabilities. Defense corridors and massive investment in R&D have reduced dependence on foreign imports. India is no longer just buying weapons, it's building them, refining them, and exporting them. With partners like Israel, France, and Russia, India has upgraded its air defense systems, cyber warfare capabilities, and space surveillance. The recent test of hypersonic weapons and anti-satellite missiles signals that India is stepping into a defense space previously reserved for global superpowers. India's Navy is asserting dominance in the Indian Ocean region, a crucial trade and security corridor. Strategic bases in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, along with stronger maritime ties with Australia and Japan, have created a new layer of defense against any regional threat, including China's aggressive moves. And all of this is happening while India maintains one of the most disciplined and combat-tested forces in the world. The shift isn't loud, it's calculated, and that's what makes it even more powerful. For the United States, India's military rise represents something more than a growing ally. It represents a future peer, a sovereign nation that doesn't wait for approval, doesn't need protection, and is ready to defend its interests on its own terms. That's not just impressive, it's intimidating. India's rise in 2025 isn't only about economics, military, or geopolitics. It's about culture. It's about influence that flows through music, films, food, language, and spirituality. This soft power, once underestimated, is now reshaping global consciousness. And unlike traditional power, it doesn't need armies or policies. It works through hearts, minds, and screens. Bollywood has become a global phenomenon. Indian films are now topping charts in countries far beyond South Asia. With emotional depth, colorful storytelling, and universal themes, these movies are connecting with audiences in Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and even the U.S. But it's not just entertainment, it's a cultural bridge. People are beginning to admire Indian traditions, values, and perspectives. Yoga, Ayurveda, meditation, and Vedic philosophy have taken root across the Western world. What once seemed mystical is now mainstream. Millions practice yoga daily, not just for fitness, but as a lifestyle. People are reading the Bhagavad Gita, lighting diyas during Diwali, and chanting Sanskrit mantras, all without ever stepping foot in India. That's not religion spreading, that's identity influencing. Indian cuisine, fashion, and even language are seeping into everyday life. Restaurants are full, fusion styles are trending, and more people are learning Hindi and Sanskrit phrases. Indian festivals like Holi and Diwali are being celebrated across the globe, not just by Indians, but by diverse communities who see meaning, joy, and depth in these traditions. This rise of cultural influence makes India relatable, admired, and spiritually significant. And unlike political power, this kind of influence can't be stopped by sanctions or walls. It travels invisibly, through joy, art, wisdom, and experience. For America and the West, this kind of soft power is both beautiful and humbling. Because it shows that India isn't just rising, it's being embraced, and that emotional connection might just be the most powerful force of all. In 2025, one of India's greatest strengths isn't found in its weapons, economy, or diplomacy. It's found in its people, especially its youth. With over 65% of its population under the age of 35, India holds the world's largest youth demographic. While much of the Western world is aging and facing declining birth rates, India is booming with young energy, ambition, and untapped potential. And that demographic edge is reshaping the global balance of power. This massive youth population is not only large, it's skilled, tech-savvy, and hungry for impact. From startup founders in Bangalore to coders in Hyderabad to space scientists in Chennai, young Indians are proving they're not just participating in the future, they're building it. The country is producing millions of engineers, doctors, innovators, and creators every year, feeding industries both at home and abroad. India's government has leaned into this advantage with education reforms, digital initiatives, and entrepreneurship programs. The result is a generation that is more connected, more informed, and more driven than any before it. They are not bound by colonial baggage or old limitations. They dream bigger, move faster, and think globally. In contrast, countries like the United States are facing a labor shortage, an aging workforce, and increasing costs to maintain their social structures. India, on the other hand, is just getting started. With a youthful population pushing innovation, demanding change, and challenging the status quo, the nation is gaining momentum that no external force can contain. This is not just a demographic statistic, it's a movement. A rising generation that refuses to be defined by poverty or the past. And as these young minds shape the next phase of India's rise, the world is being forced to pay attention, especially the West, which no longer holds a monopoly on the future. In 2025, India is no longer just representing itself on the world stage, it's becoming the voice of the global South. For decades, developing nations have been pushed to the sidelines in global decision-making, often dictated by Western interests and priorities. But now, India is standing tall and speaking up, not just for itself, but for billions across Asia, Africa, and Latin America who have long been unheard. And that shift is making the West uneasy. India's leadership in forums like BRICS, the G20, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization isn't just symbolic, it's strategic. When India hosts summits or delivers speeches, it doesn't echo Western talking points. It challenges them. It advocates for fairer trade, climate justice, digital equality, and a multipolar world order. It demands that the concerns of developing nations be taken seriously, not pitied, not lectured, but respected. What makes India's voice powerful is its credibility. It's not preaching from a place of privilege, it's rising from the same soil many other nations are trying to rise from, It understands the struggles of poverty, colonial history, and unequal systems. Yet it has managed to build a thriving democracy, grow a robust economy, and maintain cultural depth while navigating a complex world. This authenticity gives India the moral and diplomatic weight to lead. When India speaks about vaccine equity, food security, or digital inclusion, it speaks with lived experience. And when it calls for reforming outdated global institutions, it's not asking, it's asserting. For Western powers used to dominating global narratives, this new leadership is a challenge. Because India isn't trying to replace them, it's trying to balance them. It's offering the global South something it's never truly had: a powerful ally, an authentic voice, and a leader who's walked the same path and risen. Beneath the surface of diplomacy and global cooperation, there's an unspoken truth. Power doesn't like to be challenged. In 2025, as India's rise becomes undeniable, the West, especially the United States, is feeling something it hasn't felt in a long time: the fear of losing control. For decades, America has been the center of gravity in global economics, technology, defense, and culture. But now a new force is emerging that doesn't follow its lead, doesn't seek its approval, and doesn't need its validation. That force is India. India is not rising in isolation. It's building alliances on its own terms. It's creating systems outside of traditional Western frameworks. It's trading in rupees, building digital infrastructure without relying on Silicon Valley, and setting its own geopolitical priorities. The West is watching this with unease, not because it doubts India's success, but because it knows what it means for the global power structure. Control isn't just about weapons or wealth, it's about influence. For years, Western nations shaped world opinion, set the rules of international trade, dictated terms to developing countries, and portrayed themselves as the standard of progress. But India's ascent is breaking that illusion. It's proving that a nation rooted in its own culture, its own values, and its own systems can rise without imitation. This frightens the old guard, because if India can do it, so can others. The monopoly on truth, leadership, and dominance is slipping. And what's replacing it is a more balanced world, one where voices like India's cannot be dismissed. So yes, the headlines may talk about cooperation and friendship, but behind closed doors, there's a quiet panic. Not because India is a threat in the traditional sense, but because it's a reminder that the world no longer belongs to one voice, one vision, or one center of control. India's rise in 2025 isn't a coincidence. It's a culmination of vision, resilience, and self-belief. From economic power to cultural influence, from youth energy to global leadership, India is no longer asking for a seat at the table. It's building a new table, and that's what's shaking the foundations of old empires. The world is changing, and India is leading that change with quiet strength and unstoppable momentum. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Stay informed, stay inspired, and never stop believing in the power of truth and transformation. Good luck to you, and may your spirit rise like India's future.